Hey everyone, and welcome. So today we're going to dive into a really fascinating and, maybe a little controversial look at financial roles inside a Muslim marriage. We're going to explore an interpretation that really challenges what a lot of us think, and it does it by going straight back to the Quran itself.
I'm sure you've heard this saying before, right? It's often thrown out there as the Islamic position on money in a marriage. The idea is that the husband is on the hook for everything, financially, while the wife has total freedom with her own money.
And that's the big question for today, isn't it? The source we're digging into argues that we really need to press pause and go back to the text to see if this popular idea actually holds water. It's a question that forces us to look a little deeper.
Okay, so first things first. To really get the critique, we have to understand the model that's being critiqued. So let's take a look at what our source calls the modern way of thinking about this.
So the argument here is that this model, the one where the husband is the only breadwinner, is basically a 1950s cultural idea dressed up in religious clothing. And people are starting to question it, not just in theory, but because, let's be real, for a lot of people, it's just not possible in today's economy.
And this is where it gets really interesting. On the one hand, this model is praised as the ultimate in women's rights in Islam. You get total financial security. But the source we're looking at pushes back hard on this. It argues that if you make an entire group of people financially unaccountable, you might accidentally make them dependent and, in the long run, incapable.
And that really brings us to the core of this whole debate. Is this interpretation genuinely empowering for women? Or does it actually have some unintended side effects that do the exact opposite?
So the common argument is pretty straightforward. People say Islam honors women by freeing them from any and all financial stress. Sure, they can earn money if they want, but they never have to spend a dime of it on the household. This is presented as this beautiful, protective right. And wow, here's the powerful counter-argument from the source. It suggests that making someone completely dependent with zero responsibilities isn't freedom at all. The claim is that it's actually a form of enslavement because it cripples a person's potential and their ability to act for themselves.
The logic behind this whole argument really hinges on this one crucial point. A core idea in the Quran is that with capability comes accountability. So if women today are empowered and totally capable of being financially independent, it doesn't really line up to say they have zero financial responsibility. Now, to build this case, the source doesn't just philosophize. It goes directly to the Quran, specifically to Surah An-Nisa or chapter 4, to look for the actual textual evidence. To understand the verses about marriage in this chapter, you've got to understand the context they're sitting in. And our source points out that this chapter is first and foremost about protecting the wealth and property of orphan girls under the care of a male guardian. The Quran lays out some super clear rules here. Guardians are told, point blank, to give an orphan her inheritance when she's old enough. They are warned very strictly not to dip into her wealth for themselves. But, and this is the absolute key, if the orphan girl isn't able to manage her own property, the guardian is told to use her own wealth to take care of her.
And there it is. That's the textual proof the source builds its argument on. The Quran itself gives us a direct example of a female being supported from her own money. This sets a precedent that a woman's wealth can, in fact, contribute to her own maintenance. So you see, it's not a simple one-size-fits-all rule. The source argues that the Quran gives us even more nuance, suggesting that this idea of absolute male maintenance isn't nearly as rigid as we've been led to believe.
Now, of course, the standard case is absolutely in there. The Quran advises a man who can't afford to marry a free-believing woman to hold off until he has the money. This clearly implies a general expectation that, the husband is usually the primary provider.
But then, check this out. In one verse, a poor man is told to wait. But in another, a free, believing woman is told it's actually better for her to marry a believing slave, who would have no money at all, than to marry a rich guy who's not a believer. What does that imply? It implies that the woman's financial standing could very well be the dominant one in the marriage. And this isn't just theory. The source points to real-life examples from early Islamic history. I mean, the Prophet's own first marriage was to Khadija, right? A powerful, wealthy businesswoman who he actually worked for. She was the one with the money. These examples show that marriages with different financial setups were a real thing. So, what does this all mean when we put it all together? Well, the source suggests that the Quran doesn't give us one rigid model. Instead, it offers two distinct frameworks for how finances can work in a marriage.
And here they are. You have Model 1. A man has the money, he marries, and the woman becomes his dependent. His job is to provide. Then you have Model 2. A man marries a woman who has her own money. In this case, his main financial duty isn't necessarily to provide for her, but to be a guardian of her wealth, to make sure nobody takes it from her.
So the crucial point here is this. The Quran's warnings aren't about a woman's money being irrelevant. Not at all. The warnings are aimed squarely at husbands, telling them not to use the marriage as an excuse to take their wife's property. This treats her like a financially adult partner whose assets are worthy of protection. And all of this leaves us with one last really big question to think about. Based on this reading of the text, does the Quran see a woman in a marriage as a fully capable, financially responsible adult partner, or as a lifelong dependent? It's a question that really challenges us to think critically about tradition, the text itself, and what empowerment truly means.